everybody. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. I sincerely want to thank you for checking into this episode. I appreciate it a lot. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and you'll get future episodes as they come out. Now, one of the things that I'm going to be doing on today's podcast is a little bit closer to some of the changes that I said we're going to roll out in 2026. And let me explain what I mean. I know there were some people that heard there was going to be changes and they got worried. And I want to assure you that we're still doing the pod every single day. And that's fine. I'm going to continue to do some of the political stories that I do, some of the news events that I cover on the pod. All of that is still going to be in here. But one of my goals for 2026 was to not go down the same rabbit hole that I went down in 2025. 2025 was a hard year for a lot of people. Politically, a lot of Canadians were frustrated. They were frustrated because of their finances and because of the state of our country. And I know that last year, it didn't start out being all political, but it certainly got that way. And I don't want the pod to be an all politics pod. I want it to be about current events. And I want to be able to include some of the lighter stories that I could include in some episodes, but sometimes they just go a little bit too long. I'm making an effort to include those in the podcast now. And today's going to be a little bit shorter, and it's not going to be all about politics. There are some political stories in here. I'm going to talk about Chrystia Freeland and what's going on with this new role that she's accepted. But I'm going to talk about some other things too that aren't specifically political. I'm going to talk about childhood vaccinations in this episode. You may have heard the Americans have introduced some changes. Far less vaccinations are required or strongly recommended for babies when they're born in America. They're aligning more with the way Europe does things. It was 17 different vaccinations that kids were getting. It's now been reduced to 11. Some people are concerned by that. Some people think, oh no, not with this administration, not with Trump in charge. I don't think that they should be messing with the vaccination schedule. Other people want the freedom and flexibility to be able to make the right choice for their child after they talk to their doctor. And that's basically what the Americans have done. But I'm going to explain more about that on this episode of Scott Fox After 9. I'm also going to talk about temporary foreign workers because I've got a particularly egregious story that I'm going to tell you about a Tim Hortons in Niagara Falls. Those two topics are just some of the things coming up on this episode of Scott Fox After 9. So I'm going to jump into it now, and I'm going to start off by playing a little teaser. You likely know that I was supposed to put out the silent date tell-all over the holidays, and I apologize that it was delayed. Life got in the way. He had to work. I was doing some traveling to visit some family, and we just couldn't get it together. Well, last night, silent date guy and silent date girl came over to my place. We had a few drinks and we recorded the tell-all. It's going to come out towards the end of this week. And I don't know yet if it'll be Friday or if I'm going to drop it on the weekend and make it a Saturday episode, but I'm leaning towards Saturday. But just to show you, it's almost ready to go. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek at the silent date guy tell-all. This is an exclusive preview. In this part, I'm talking to silent date guy about the trip that he did to a casino with silent date girl. If you remember that episode, you likely know that there was a pretty famous football player sitting at the card table that she was playing at. This guy gave silent date guy some money and basically told him, scram, I want to play cards with your girlfriend. And silent date guy took the money and went and gambled. I thought that was weird to leave his girl with somebody that is a complete stranger to him and possibly even a threat. This is a good-looking guy. I asked him about it in the tell-all. Listen to this. But I mean, it's kind of, you're there with your girl, and there's a guy there that you don't really know, and he knows your girlfriend, and he says, here's some money, piss off. Like, you weren't worried that, oh my God, my girl's going to leave with him, or you're just that confident in your relationship?
I mean, I had a little bit of reservation about it, of course. Any guy would, especially when you're looking at somebody who's probably, 6'7" and 350 pounds of pure muscle. Like,
he's a big boy.
Like, don't get me wrong. I can't lie. But at the same token, if you're going to give anything a chance, you got to take the benefit of the doubt. Sure, maybe she knows him, maybe she doesn't. But if she wanted me to stay around, she would have said, no, don't. She was obviously there for a reason. I got to trust her at this point. I have no reason not to.
I've never said what she does, and I won't. But I think you would agree she's pretty good at what she does. She's a good girl.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's it. That's all you get for a preview of the silent date tell-all. But I will tell you, we went in depth. I asked him about the dancing. I asked him about the traveling. I asked him about her kid and his relationship with the kid. I asked about her ex-husband, who is still around quite a bit. I asked him to talk about her mansion and so much more. All of that is going to come out this weekend in the Silent Date Guy tell-all with Silent Date Guy and myself. And yes, Silent Date Girl was there at my place last night, but she did not participate in the recording. In fact, she stayed upstairs with my girlfriend while Silent Date Guy and I were in the basement recording in my studio. It's a real interesting thing. If you've been following the story, it's great. And you get the conclusion, basically, I think this coming weekend. I also want to point out that if you haven't heard all of the Silent Date Guy episodes, I did create a Spotify playlist of them. So if you go on Spotify and search for Silent Date Guy, there is a playlist that includes all of the episodes that are specifically about Silent Date Guy. So you might want to look into that. Let's move on. Last night, Toronto Maple Leafs, who I said I was giving up on. I said I'm not going to watch this team anymore. They are terrible, and they have let me down way too many times. They were playing the Florida Panthers, and they won 4-1. Good job. Go Leafs, go. They talked to Brad Marchand after the game, and one of the things that they talked to Brad about was the possibility that he could have come to Toronto when he was a free agent. Here's him talking about it.
It was between Florida and Toronto of where I was going to go. I mean, ultimately, if I never thought that it was going to be possible to re-sign in Florida. I really didn't, just with the guys that we had up and stuff like that. But, Toronto, I was serious about what I said with where they're at. As a group, the way that they're competing now, they compete the right way, which is what they kind of had to get over that hurdle. It's unfortunate the fans ran Marner out of town. That kind of, that's a huge impact for their group. He's a point-of-game player. Like that hurts. So, but yeah, they're a great team, great organization, but once the opportunity came up to sign here, it was kind of no question. It's where I wanted to be.
Little bit of Brad Marchand indicating that, yeah, he was real close to being a Toronto Maple Leaf. He almost came to Toronto, but he also pointed out one of the things that he doesn't seem very happy about is the fact that, yeah, the fans basically running the team ran Mitch Marner right out of town and right to the Las Vegas Golden Knights. How do you do that when you've got one of the best players in hockey? How do you just let him go? I never understood that. I thought it was a silly move to get rid of Marner, and clearly Brad Marchand does. And that means there's other NHL players that have taken note of that, and that might be one of the things that prevents other players from coming to Toronto in the future. But I wanted to get that out there because we'll be watching Brad many times over the next couple of months as we go through the playoffs, the Olympics, and much, much more. Is he on the Olympic squad? Let me find out. Yes, confirmed. He is on the Olympic team, and actually, you know what? That does look like a hell of a team. The Olympics might actually be fun to watch. It's just, I don't know if Canada's going to be able to get this one done because the American squad is also very, very good. But while I'm talking sports, I want to introduce you to someone else. The Toronto Blue Jays have signed a new player, and I admit, when I read that they signed this player, I had to ask myself, who the hell is that? I've never even heard of this guy, and we're paying him a heck of a lot of money. The Blue Jays are paying $60 million US over 4 years to sign Kuzama Okamoto to play for the Jays. He was formally introduced to the team yesterday at a news conference at Rogers Center. He is coming off an 11-year run playing baseball in Japan. But in those 11 years, he won the league home run title 3 times. Apparently, he's also an infielder. He can play third base, and he can play other positions as well. Let's meet this new guy who doesn't speak very much English. Most of what he does goes through a translator, but this is Kazuma Okamoto talking yesterday at Rogers Center.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kazuma Okamoto. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I am very happy to join Blue Jays. I will work hard every day and do my best for the team. Thank you for your support. Nice to meet you. Go Blue Jays.
Oh, yikes. Those news conferences are going to get weird. It's always strange when they're speaking through an interpreter at those news conferences, but apparently this guy is pretty good. So if you're looking forward to next Blue Jays season, we will have a new Jay out there, and he apparently hits a lot of home runs. And if you think about it, just one more home run would have probably done the trick, and the Jays might have won the World Series had they had him this year. But let's move on. I said there was a lot of different things I'm going to cover in this pod. I've done a little bit of sports. Now I'm going to move a little bit into kind of a political area. It's a follow-up on something that I talked about yesterday when Prime Minister Mark Carney was over in France to talk about the coalition of the willing, the countries that want to put troops on the ground in Ukraine, they say, to try and make sure that if a peace deal is worked out, that the peace remains. Or that they just keep the war going. I'm not 100% sure what their strategy is. One of the questions that got asked of the Prime Minister, though, was about a story that's in the news right now that the Americans are getting very, very excited again about the possibility of making Greenland either a U.S. territory or the 51st state. In fact, there's a lot of reason to believe that these talks are going right up to the top, and the Americans are getting ready to make a move without Canada. Here's the Prime Minister being asked about the U.S. possibly annexing Greenland.
I just want to pick up on what Chrystia was talking with you about a moment ago on Greenland. The Danish Prime Minister has said that any type of military force used to annex Greenland would be the end of NATO. Do you concur with that assessment?
Well, let me reiterate what I said to Mr. Noel, which is that the future of Greenland is a decision for Greenland and for Denmark exclusively. It's their decision. Secondly, from a NATO context, the way I would frame it is that the western flank of NATO, which would include Greenland, the Arctic, is, given the evolving threat environment, is an area that we as NATO, Canada obviously importantly, given our geography, need to invest more in. This is a point that we've been making in recent years and since I became Prime Minister that we've really stressed. And with our build-up that's just beginning of our military capabilities, we are making heavy investments in the Arctic. We'll be working with our Nordic partners. We'll be working through NATO. This is one of the issues I'll be discussing with the Secretary General as part of an ongoing discussion with him around this to further advance it.
Stephen Miller, who is a senior advisor to President Trump, has refused to rule out military force in the annexation of Greenland. Does that trouble you?
Well, I didn't see the specific comments that Mr. Miller may have made. Look, I'll take a step back. We're partners in NATO. It is a mutual defense alliance. We can provide that security. And when we look at a couple basic, there's basic principles here, which is self-determination of nations, sovereignty, territorial integrity. And then there is approaches that we have as partners to what we're trying to accomplish. And as NATO, we can provide security for all of NATO, Greenland included. And as the threat environment is changing, we're making the investments in order to do that, and we can operationalize and augment and build additional plans to do that. So, and that's what we will do. And we stand with Denmark. We stand with Greenland. Our closest partnership is with the United States, and we'll work with everybody to make sure that we move forward together.
Ooh, our closest relationship is with the United States. Mark Carney said it again. Although he didn't really answer the question. For those who are concerned that the U.S. is about to invade Greenland, I just want to point out, while anything could happen, and often does with President Trump in charge, I don't think there's going to be a military conflict in Greenland. The U.S. is not going to send aircraft carriers and fighter jets and submarines and all of these other things and forcefully take Greenland. If they do get Greenland, it'll almost certainly be in a deal with Denmark, or the people of Greenland simply decide they would like to become a territory of the United States, or they'd like to become a state. Either way, there's a lot of reason to think the U.S. is going to compensate whoever very, very well for Greenland. And I don't know what that compensation is going to look like, but nobody is going to be taken hostage. This is the U.S. trying to assert their sovereignty over the Arctic. And until now, they kind of had Canada. They border us. We border the Arctic. It worked out well because we have that security relationship, but things aren't great between us and the Americans. So the Americans are going to go around us, and they're going to have their own presence in Greenland. I don't think that anybody is going to be that unhappy with how it ends up, as long as everybody follows the rules. There's certain things that need to be done here, and I have to think the people of Greenland should consent to this, at least through a referendum or a majority vote of some kind. Either way, they're going to get compensated, and I believe that Greenland is probably going to be part of America not long from now, and that leaves us right in the middle. So America, who said they don't really need Canada for anything, has worked around the oil situation. They have now got their setup in Venezuela, whatever that looks like. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're occupying Venezuela, but there's no reason to think that they don't have some strong voices in the Venezuelan government trying to call the shots on how things are going to get done. They've got Venezuela for oil. They'll have Greenland for the Arctic. We're really running out of lane here in Canada to try and have some leverage to get a deal done with the Americans. And unfortunately, that's not good for us. We should have had a deal back at the end of July. Then again, we should have had a deal in November, but we sabotaged that deal. Everybody agreed we were very, very close until we blew things up with that ad featuring Ronald Reagan and the tariffs. So I don't know where Canada goes from here, but yeah, I have every reason to believe that Greenland is probably going to become an American territory. Now, Denmark says if the U.S. tries to take it forcefully, that'll be the end of NATO. Ooh. I don't know if the U.S. needs NATO. I really don't. And to be honest with you, I think right now this is a lot of posturing. There's a lot of bluster. There's even some threats, and I don't take any of them seriously. At the end of the day, this is a negotiation. Everybody's looking for a little bit of leverage. The U.S. refusing to rule out using military force to take Greenland. I mean, on paper and in news conferences, they may be refusing to take that off the table. I just don't see any scenario where the U.S. invades Greenland and takes it forcefully. I really just don't think that that's going to happen. I do think, though, that if the U.S. does take it over, Greenland may become an actual place that you want to visit. Right now, it seems very vast and cold and barren. The Americans are very good at building attractions and hotels and golf courses and things like that. So you never know. We may actually end up with a closer relationship to Greenland, depending on how things go. But if you're thinking, oh my God, the U.S. is getting ready to invade them just like they invaded Venezuela. I mean, they kind of invaded Venezuela, but I don't see it as an occupation. Greenland, that's a little bit different, but it seems like this is going to be settled diplomatically, and that's the way it should be settled. There's nothing that says the way things are now is the way they must forever be. The world has been constantly changing ownership of various countries and territories. If it's time for Denmark to hand Greenland over to the Americans and they get something good in return, I personally don't have a problem with it. Now, I did mention Venezuela, and that's an interesting one because a neat story broke yesterday, and I don't know that everybody fully understands what's at stake here. In this particular story, I'm going to read it from the Associated Press. U.S. President Donald Trump says Venezuela will be providing 30 to 50 million barrels of oil to the United States, and they're pledging to use proceeds from the sale of this oil to benefit the people of both countries. Tuesday, officials in Caracas announced that at least 24 Venezuelan security officers were killed in last weekend's dead-of-the-night U.S. military operation to capture President Nicolas Maduro and spirit him off to New York to face drug trafficking charges. The country's acting president, Dile Rodriguez, pushed back on Trump days after Trump warned she would face an outcome worse than Maduro's if she does not do what's right. I mean, that whole story is very, very misleading, and it's meant to invoke an emotion in you. But that story, because it came from the Associated Press, is all over. It's being used on radio, in television, and in blogs. In reality, here's what I have found out about this. Venezuela providing 30 to 50 million barrels of oil to the Americans. Wow, that sounds crazy. They're already going around Canada. Not exactly. Canada sends 4 million barrels a day of oil to America. 4 million barrels a day through our pipelines get sent from Canada to the United States. So when they get 30 to 50 million barrels of oil from Venezuela, they're basically getting a 10-day supply of what they already get from Canada. Now, clearly, that's a shot fired at us. That's trying to get the Canadians' attention, right? Hey, we'll just go and get oil from Venezuela. Venezuela needs to sell oil. That's one of the ways that the Venezuelan people are going to prosper. The U.S. is going to buy it at market price. No doubt they're sending a message to Canada that, hey, we can get it from Venezuela now. They want to negotiate a deal with us. That's the reason that they put that number out there. It's not insurmountable. Canada's not really losing a ton there, 30 to 50 million barrels, unless the U.S. is increasing their capacity. I really don't know what we have to worry about right now, other than the message that the Americans are clearly sending. Canada, play ball. Let's work out a deal, or we'll just get our oil from Venezuela. 30 to 50 million barrels. The way they're presenting that story on the news is the U.S. has already given up on Canada. I personally don't see it that way. 30 to 50 million barrels is, again, about a 10-day supply. That's not a ton of oil in the grand scheme of things, especially when you consider that Canada sends 4 million barrels a day to America. So I don't think we need to panic about that, but it is something that I hope Mark Carney and the Canadian negotiating team is paying attention to. We're about to lose our best and pretty much only customer. We've either got to work something out with the Americans, or we got to hurry up and get those pipelines built. We got to get those pipelines built and start preparing to send Canadian oil around the world. Because if we lose the Americans as our customer, we are in bad shape. I'm also kind of wondering what this Venezuela situation is going to do for the prospects of Alberta's sovereignty. In Alberta, they're getting ready to have a referendum. The question will be asked: should Alberta be a sovereign country or independent of Canada? There's a lot of people who think that if Alberta does become sovereign and independent of Canada, it might even join the United States. Well, if the United States has access to all that Venezuelan oil, I'm not sure that they need Alberta as much as they once might have. This might take away some leverage from Alberta to negotiate a little bit. And frankly, that can't be a very comfortable feeling for Albertans either. So listen, we got to get a deal done with the Americans. They're basically warning us we have other options now. So we've lost some leverage, but we got to sit down and hammer out a deal and try and get this done with the Americans. This is an opportunity. This is not necessarily a setback. And by the way, the news continues to write very misleading, ominous, and scary stories about America. Again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. I talked about Prime Minister Mark Carney over in Paris. He had the meetings there with the Coalition of the Willing. That was all to do with Ukraine. And Canada has agreed they will put troops on the ground in Ukraine if a peace deal is worked out, and Canada will join the UK and France and several other countries, putting our military members in harm's way right between Russia and Ukraine. Well, you've likely heard a lot about Chrystia Freeland, our former deputy prime minister. She's very intimately connected to Ukraine. I think everybody knows and understands that. We're getting an interesting timeline now, though. As you've likely heard, she has agreed to work for the Ukrainian government. She's going to be advising Volodymyr Zelensky. That's a weird thing for a Canadian government official to be advocating for and working for another country. When did all this come to be, and why is Chrystia Freeland still sitting as a member of parliament in Canada? She said she will step down, but she hasn't done it yet. Now we know. Chrystia Freeland was offered that job in Ukraine on December 22nd. December the 22nd. She informed Prime Minister Carney December 24th on Christmas Eve. They kept it a secret. We did not know about this until January the 5th. But if you look in between and recall some of the events that happened over the break, December 27th, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland gave another $2.5 billion Canadian dollars to Ukraine, and they didn't reveal the conflict. That, I think, is contemptuous. I mean, at this point, she'd already decided she was going to take the job in Ukraine. And then on her way out the door, without even telling Canadians that she's leaving or that she's already working for a foreign government, they committed $2.5 billion to that foreign government. I think every Canadian has an absolute right to ask very serious questions about what the hell is going on in Ukraine. What is so strategic and important about Ukraine that Canada has to spend so much treasure and possibly even blood if we're going to put Canadian forces in harm's way to protect Ukraine? It has to be more than protecting global democracy from a Russian takeover. There has to be more to it. And this Chrystia Freeland situation, it stinks, guys. Now, the Liberals in Ottawa they've got a whole bunch of different irons in the fire. They've got to deal with this Chrystia Freeland thing. And I've noticed there aren't a heck of a lot of Liberal cabinet members who are racing to go on television and try and defend what Chrystia Freeland is doing here. Now it's come out that the Liberals are also still actively trying to recruit Conservatives to cross the floor and join them. The latest one, Scott Anderson. Scott Anderson is a Conservative member of Parliament. It was just reported the other day, Liberals have been trying to flip him and get him to cross the floor over to them. Well, I'm happy to say there is still some integrity in politics. Scott Anderson has said, I have no intention of crossing the floor. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. He said he will never betray his constituents. And I think that that is a great level of integrity for one of our politicians and elected representatives to have. I think that is so important that not only did he turn that offer down, that he's now telling the Canadian people there's now no way to deny it. The Liberals are making deals. They're trying to basically bribe Conservatives and other members of the opposition to cross the floor and give them a majority that the Canadian voters did not give them. That's very, very concerning. It's dishonest, and that's not what Canadians voted for. They did not vote to give Mark Carney a majority government. If he wants to go and flash some money and opportunity and all kinds of other stuff in front of weak members of Parliament to try and lure them over to his side, I mean, we need to have an election. We just do. If Mark Carney wants a majority government, he should come and ask the voters for one. Trying to do it with backdoor deals, that's really, really shady. Let's move on. Let's talk about taxes. I want to play a little bit of a video that was dropped by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco Terrazzano does great work working for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And now that payroll taxes have gone up in 2026, we knew that they were going to go up. Basically, the tax cut, that little one that we got back in June, has been wiped out for the vast majority of Canadians. Listen to Franco explaining.
You have the normal income tax that most people are aware of, but you also have payroll taxes. And payroll taxes are just another form of income tax, right? It's the amount of money that the government essentially takes away from your paycheck. So on the income tax cut, Carney cut the lowest income tax bracket from 15 to 14%. Now, on average, for the average taxpayer, you're looking at savings of about $190 in 2026. Now, that depends on, how much income you earn. It really ranges from about $90 of savings to about $330. But the average taxpayer, according to the parliamentary budget officer, is looking at some income tax savings there of $190. But Carney's increasing payroll taxes in 2026, right? So let's look at the worker. If you're making $85,000 or more in payroll taxes, you're going to pay about $5,700 around there. Okay, your employer will also have to fork over about $6,200, so more than $6,000 in payroll taxes in 2026. So it's a payroll tax increase for that worker making $85,000 or more of about $262. Right. So on the one hand, you have a little bit of income tax savings. It depends on what bracket you're in, a little bit. But then on the other hand, you're paying higher payroll taxes if you're making $85,000 or more. So, depending on your income level, you might save a little bit of money. You might. But really, we're not talking about meaningful tax relief, if at all, when we're talking about federal income taxes.
When you break it down like that, I feel ripped off. This is yet another bait and switch. Everybody get excited because we are giving you a tax cut. In fact, the Liberals still brag about that tax cut. Then they completely wiped it off the board by raising payroll taxes. So frustrating. I mean, it's almost getting funny at this point how often we get misled and how often we fall for it, to be honest with you. Did anybody ask back in June, hey, that tax cut that you're giving us that you insist is going to be helpful and meaningful for families? It's not a lot, but you insist it's going to help. Is that real, or are you going to wipe it out when those payroll taxes go up? Nobody even looked down the line at what was going to happen with the payroll taxes, but here we are. Your tax cut has basically been wiped out. Another topic that is very, very interesting to a lot of people is vaccinations. This became amplified during COVID when the government tried to get everybody to get the shot, and not just the shot, get a second shot, get a booster shot, get a booster for your booster shot. There's a lot of people who said, you know what, I am done with vaccinations and I don't know what was in that COVID vaccine, but I don't want it. That has led to some vaccine hesitancy, and it's led a lot of people to think that the government in America right now, the Trump administration, isn't necessarily following the science when they make changes to the vaccine schedule. These are the ones that are strongly recommended for children, for newborn babies. Well, the U.S. has made a change. I know that there's some people who are uncomfortable with it, so I just want to dispel a couple of myths and rumors about that change. I'm going to read you the story again from the Associated Press. U.S. health officials have announced a major overhaul of the nation's childhood vaccination guidance, significantly reducing the number of vaccines the Center for Disease Control and Prevention recommends universally for all children. The move, effective immediately, cuts back routine recommendations from 17 different diseases that they vaccinate a kid against to 11, shifting several long recommended shots into more selective or optional categories. Under the revised schedule that they just released on Monday, vaccines that protect against measles, mumps, rubella, polio, tetanus, diphtheria, whooping cough, influenza type B, pneumococcal disease, human papillomavirus, and chickenpox remain universally recommended for all children. That's from the CDC. That didn't change. However, routine recommended vaccinations for several other diseases that were long considered standard, including the ones for influenza, rotavirus, hepatitis A and B, respiratory RSV, I'll just use the short form, and certain forms of meningococcal disease have been rescinded. Instead, the CDC now advises these be given only after shared clinical decision-making between parents and healthcare providers or for children at higher risk of serious illness. Basically, what the Americans have done is brought the vaccine schedule for newborns and young children in line with exactly what they're doing in Europe. The same ones that are recommended in Europe are now the ones that are recommended in America. And the extra ones are still available. If you really want your kid vaccinated for influenza or rotavirus, you can still do that. They're just not on the universally recommended for all children list. Why are people so upset about it? Is it just a general distrust of Donald Trump? Because I can tell you, there's a lot of people, and I hear from them regularly, that are very concerned about vaccinations and how insistent some of the drug companies and some of the members of our government and some of the people at Health Canada are about putting these shots in your arms. And we all know they went completely over the top during COVID. And I think that that's part of the reason that there's vaccine hesitancy right now is because of Health Canada and our officials themselves. Why are people upset that no vaccine has been taken away? It's just less are recommended. And the ones that are no longer recommended for all kids, I mean, we're talking about the flu shot. We're talking about the RSV one. These are ones that I'm really kind of surprised we were giving to children in the first place. Don't take my word for it, though. Don't take any medical advice from me. I just want to get this out there because already there's health officials in Canada that are trying to say things like, we might not be able to trust the Americans anymore. We may no longer be able to follow guidance from the CDC because they've gone rogue. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't, but I don't understand how it's going rogue to bring them in line with the same thing countries over in Europe have been doing for a long time. The same way things always used to be. The U.S. is trying to get to the bottom of why their society is getting sicker and why their society is producing so many kids that have very special, unique, and high needs. Some people say it's related to vaccines. Some of the experts would say that's nonsense. I don't know if we're any closer to finding out the truth. But either way, me personally, as a dad who had to make these decisions at the time, co-make these decisions regarding my kids, I was petrified about doing the wrong thing for my kid. Everybody wants to make sure that they're doing the right thing for their children. I don't have a problem with them changing the recommendations. I do have a problem, though, with the misinformation that's coming out of our government suggesting things like you can't trust the CDC. You can't trust the Americans anymore because Donald Trump is telling them what they're going to put on the list of recommended vaccines. I really don't see it that way. The way I see it personally, I think there's some people in America, including Secretary Kennedy, who are very, very deeply concerned about the state of America's health. And I think they're trying to do the best thing that they can. They're recommending less vaccinations in America. And I don't have a problem with that. Really, at the end of the day, what they're doing is asking you to talk to your doctor and make that decision in cooperation with them. Have that chat with your doctor if you're expecting a little one. In fact, a very good friend of mine just had a little one today. I was just texting with him, and no doubt he's going to have to make this decision soon too, he and his wife. We only want to give them what they need. We don't want to give them anything that could lead to further health complications. So talk to the doctor about that. Ask your doctor, do I really need to give a newborn baby a flu shot? Do I need to do that, or is that just putting something else in their body that maybe their body's not ready for at this age and stage? Have those conversations with your doctor. You don't have to take medical advice from Donald Trump, but I do want our elected officials to make sure that when they talk to us about this, they have facts and they have stats. I want to make sure that whatever we're being advised to put into our kids, and all of us really, there's a lot of vaccines that even adults take. I want to make sure that it's tested, safe, and effective, and not going to lead to long-term health complications. I think everybody wants that, and I hope that that is the priority. I also said that on this episode, I wanted to talk about temporary foreign workers because I've come across a story here that, frankly, I have a really hard time believing and understanding. Let's go to Niagara Falls, Canada. The Tim Hortons on Clifton Hill. That's the main street in Niagara Falls. For those who don't know, Clifton Hill is full of all kinds of attractions, and it leads right to the brink of the falls, right in the heart of Niagara Falls. Apparently, the Tim Hortons on Clifton Hill, one of the busiest locations in Canada consistently for years, is going to have to close their doors. According to reports, the Tim Hortons on Clifton Hill in Niagara Falls is going to close because of severe staffing shortages as international students leave the country in large numbers and the location struggles to find enough local workers to keep operations running. The shutdown highlights the growing concerns around labor gaps, tourism-heavy areas, and how recent immigration and employment shifts are impacting major Canadian businesses. Let's be real here. You've got one of the busiest Tim Hortons locations in the country, and they want to shut it down because they say they can't find anybody who wants to work there. So one of two things is happening. Either they're trying to make a point that they need temporary foreign workers, or they're trying to make the point that even if you have an extremely busy location, the cost of labor in Canada and in Ontario doesn't make doing business feasible. If a Tim Hortons in a major tourist area like Niagara Falls truly cannot find any staff and they're going to have to close, they're either lobbying the government and trying to prove a point with this poorly worded story here. They're trying to prove a point that Canada should have temporary foreign workers and they want them. Or they truly just can't make a go of it. They can't have a viable business employing all kinds of people and still be profitable with the cost of labor in Canada. And I don't know what the answer is here, but I would suggest this story seems very dishonest. If I were in charge of human resources at Tim Hortons in Niagara Falls, I am convinced that in less than a week, I could fully staff that operation. To say that they can't find anybody who wants to work at a Tim Hortons in Niagara Falls, I just have a hard time believing that. Are they just lobbying for more temporary foreign workers? Are they trying to prove a point here? Is that what this is? Or is the cost of doing business just too high in Ontario? I'll leave that as an open-ended question. Friends, slightly different episode today. I tried to take a bit of a different tone. Hopefully you got some good information out of this. And if not, feel free to debate me. You can slide into my DMs anytime at Scott Fox On Air. And by the way, Friday, the first listener DMs episode of 2026. Don't forget that Silent Date episode is coming out this weekend. Have yourselves a great one. I'll be back here with you tomorrow with more Scott Fox After 9. To end things off, enjoy the sounds of Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey now, I'll see you tomorrow.